All right. Hello and welcome to Bamboo Batu Dialogues with Bamboo. Today we are speaking with Shanti Pierce in Florida. Shanti's been into bamboo for a long time. She loves bamboo. It's like I do. And we're going to talk to her about all the different things that she's doing with bamboo. So, Shanti, why don't you give us a little introduction? Tell us about yourself, how you got into bamboo and what you love about bamboo.
Yeah, so I've actually been working with bamboo almost really close to 30 years now. And I got started because I was in event management and I just didn't want to do that anymore. And so I had one of those like moments where I was like, pivot. And I went from making like $1,500 a week to taking a $6 an hour job at a nursery. And that nursery ended up being a bamboo ornamental grass and perennial nursery. And so from there, I started running the landscape division, and we were working with Animal Kingdom. It was under construction at the time. And we were sending ornamental grasses and bamboos to Animal Kingdom. And from there, I started working with Walt Disney Imagineering. I was their bamboo and ornamental grass specialist on the Animal Kingdom project. And then I started my farm here in Florida. So I worked for Disney for about 4 years, which was amazing, amazing, amazing experience because it was all plants and animals, which are my favorite things. And about so I was doing a lot of landscaping and planting and things like that. And then I morphed into doing tea and medicinals. And I've been doing that for a long time. And now I kind of combine. I do planting, I do a lot of consulting and planting for small homesteads, anywhere from a quarter of an acre to 50 acres, and plant for all sorts of things for that. And then I also make teas and medicinal products from bamboo, shampoos, soaps, all that kind of stuff. And then also I'm into doing art. So I like to do immersive experiences where people can really dive into bamboo without maybe having to have, I call them gateway projects kind of thing. Like, I'm not Vince Math, so I'm not building big structures, although I love building with him. But I do like doing like really simple things where people can just get their hands on. And I call it healing arts and gateway projects. And so I work with Gerard from Bamboo DNA, and we do some events during the year. I've worked with other people, and I like to work in community with other bamboo people and do these projects that people can really just kind of immerse in bamboo and get the feel for it and spend time.
So
So
it's,
that's
it's like it's like creative therapy, like hands-on
yes.
doing something
Yeah.
constructive with the bamboo and focusing on just making something
Well,
interesting.
what I like to tell people is like, for the most part, people's lives are surrounded by like basically McDonald's version of building materials. Like they're touching paint and drywall, and they're all processed materials. Like they're very, unless they have granite countertops, they're really not touching anything that is remotely natural.
Right.
And a lot of people just go from their cars to their house and back and forth. They don't put their feet on the ground. Like they're never touching raw materials. They're touching plastic, they're touching their
Mm.
phone. Like, so just the process of touching a raw material can be like really, really healing, really, really healing, and especially bamboo.
Yeah.
So um, there was a guy a long time ago who I met, and he was from Japan, and he told me, he said, the village north of me was known to work with bamboo. They made baskets and things. They just were bamboo workers. That's what they were known for, is they built things out of bamboo. And he said they were also known to never get sick. So
Nice. Well, it's
I'm working with that one.
yeah, it sounds good. Sounds good to me. Yeah, no, I see why you call it a gateway treatment. You start handling natural materials and you start to realize how few natural materials you're really in touch with. and it kind of opens up a gateway into like, hey, there's a whole world out there that I, need to reconnect with.
And play.
Yeah.
Play. Adults, adults, like, we're so trained on not playing, or playing, like, what we're trained to play with is like get really drunk, or like do like, well, we can play without having to use substances, and that's what I like. Also like to do events where people are on substances, that it becomes something, because that is a fact. And this becomes a space where they can play and use their energy and creativity, and it kind of occupies them, and it can be very healing while they're in that state, because to me that's just a reality of what's happening when these festivals are going on. And so having a space where they can focus and do something and keep them from having bad experiences and ending up in a hospital or something. So I like to create safe spaces at those kind of things, but I do it at all sorts of different events, not just ones that, that have lots of activity.
Like Burning Man or things like that, music festivals. Is that
Music festivals? Yeah. Music festivals, I think, are really, really important for this kind of thing. But I like to do them. I do them at all sorts of events for kids, for adults, for, all sorts of things. So
nice.
you can drink tea and play with bamboo, build.
I didn't realize you had worked with Disney doing their ornamental plants. That's really cool. And you said, did you say the zoo also?
Animal Kingdom is Disney's. Yeah.
Okay.
So, and that, I think for me, what was really important about working at Disney was it really sent me in to this zone of thinking of bamboo as a food, because we had a whole list of plants that we could use in the animal containments as non-toxic plants, right? And also we had a forage nursery. And so we really used bamboos to feed the animals. I mean, all the animals had bamboos in their diet. The gorillas even ate bamboos, right?
Sure.
So
yeah.
We had bamboos in our forage nursery, but we also had bamboos in all the containments because the animals would eat them. And so that was always in the back of my head when I started to do tea. But it's now, like, here in the US, our bamboo industry, is different than, like, say, Africa or things like that. Like, we are looking at different ways. And one of the biggest things is like feeding animals. So like on small homesteads and stuff, that really comes into play. I'm like, we were doing that back in the mid 90s in at Disney, using bamboo. And the thing about that is that from there, all the zoos across the United States started to be like, oh, we can use bamboos to feed our animals too. And so it really kind of snowballed into something, a really good use for bamboos. I don't think it's anywhere near capacity. Like, people just don't know that they can use it to feed their animals, that it's so high in minerals, that the protein is usually, depending on the species, it's like between 10 and 13%. So it's like a low to mid range protein content for forage. But the mineral content, the silica content, that's doing, like, building connective tissues, strong bones, all the things that the minerals are doing. I mean, animals are just as demineralized as people right now. And so adding bamboo into their diet can really help with that. And they continue to do that. They have like I said, they have a whole forage nursery. And so implementing that in people's yards where they don't have to go buy as much food for their animals is a really good use of bamboo.
Yeah, it's a good outlet for a lot of people. Reach out to me asking where they can sell their bamboo and what they can do with it. They want to become a professional bamboo farmer. And that's one of the possibilities is supplying a local zoo, feed the panda bears, feed the gorillas. Because like you said, we're nowhere near capacity. Those, big animals can eat such a great amount of bamboo. So
the one caveat I would say with that is I always caution, because there's a propensity in every industry that if you see something that works, you kind of push the limits for the monetary style, right?
Right.
And I just want to be very clear about this. Animals eat leaves. They don't eat culms and branches. So, because I think what happens is people are like, oh, I can feed them, maybe I could just take the whole bamboo thing and put it into a chipper and make a pellet and then feed that to them. I want to really, really caution, because I see this is where things are going, that I don't feel is safe. I don't feel it's safe to feed the culm to the animals. And here's why. The leaves of bamboos have low to no cyanic glycosides.
Right.
The only thing I ever caution on is bamboo vulgaris, which has a higher amount. If it's more bitter, it has higher amounts of cyanic glycosides.
Mhm.
That's the only one I ever caution about. And really, like, we have so many bamboos, unless that's all you have, it's usually fine, but that's the only one. So vulgaris, vittata, waman. Well, you're not going to plant waman for forage anyway. I would stay away from those, but pretty much all the other ones are all good. The philostachys, the bambusas, even the dendrocalamuses, they're all good. So those leaves, but putting a culm into a chipper and feeding that to an animal has higher amount of cyanic glycosides. Now, what that's going to do, I don't know, but that is a toxin, and the animals themselves don't choose to eat the culm or the branches. They just eat the leaves. So my caution is stick with the leaves. Please stick with the leaves and don't try and chip up the whole thing and feed it to an animal, because I don't know what that's going to do.
Okay.
So that being said, what the best way to do it is to do a bamboo that has leaf to culm ratio, so higher leaf to culm ratio. The one that we used is one that people love to hate, is Pseudosassa japonica. So we used a lot of Pseudosassa japonica, and what we did was we would plant rows of it out, like 10-foot wide rows, and then you have a row in between for the tractor to go down and cut it like hay. And then you cut all the way down and let that grow up, and the animals eat the leaves off of it. And then you don't have as much to clean up, because you're going to have to pull the culms back out if you're feeding the whole thing to them.
Yeah, they're pretty skinny, the thin culm.
Right.
Why do you say people love to hate
The runner.
species? Oh, because it's a runner. Oh, okay.
Yeah. I mean, the other one that would be good too, like anything that has a smaller culm and more leaves is going to be good. Because otherwise you have to pull all those culms out. Like if you cut a whole bunch of material, say off like a bambusa, like a sea breeze or something, and you're cutting the tops, maybe you're taking like a big machine and chopping it, those culms you're going to end up having to pull back out, which is like a lot of work, right? If you're dumping them into, like, say, a cow pasture or something, then you're going to have to pull them back out or let them sit there and degrade or whatever you're going to do. But the cows are going to leaves off and leave the branches and the culms. So it's a little bit of a logistic.
Yeah. Would they trample the culms, what's left there? The cows just kind of trample it and make like wood chips out of it, maybe, or
right. I mean, you could leave them over time and maybe at some point take a tractor with a grapple and just pick them, and they'll do that. I've seen horses, what they'll do is like, so because people will ask me to plant inside the containment. So the thing about planting inside the containment is that you have to protect the bamboo long enough for it to get established so that animals, because they'll just eat it to the ground. They won't eat new shoots and they won't eat culms because those are bitter, right? On the philostachys, they could get to know to eat the shoots, that like if it was a pig or something, but I haven't seen that happen yet. Animals are all about learning. Like they're very familiar with leaves, but they're not so familiar with eating other parts. So like if you introduce a new plant to them, they'll go with what they know. They know to eat the leaves, but they don't know to eat the shoots, right? With the bambusas, they're going to be bitter, so they're not going to eat them. Even pigs won't eat them. But philostachys, they're not bitter because philostachys have cyanic glycosides in the shoots. So that's kind of the difference, at least the smaller ones. So yeah, so that you can come, it's interesting. There was a study done at, I believe it was Clemson University, like in 1960s, like a 20-year study. And what they did was this exact thing. They took, I think, 10 different types of Philostachys, and they grew them and cut them and grew them and cut them and grew them and cut them to see which ones would grow back the best, because bamboos do not like to be cut and grow and cut and grow. They don't, that's not their preferred method of growth, right?
Like
They don't,
clear cutting them, you mean?
yeah, they get a lot smaller and
Right.
diminish, keep cutting them back, right? So they did 10 different species to see which ones were doing well. And I think the best one was Aurea and Ruber marginata. But we haven't done that on the bambuses. And, this is really important, because this idea of clear cutting comes into like what's happening in Brazil and India, where they're having issues with like mechanization of harvesting bamboo, and how to harvest it. And they want to use the mechanization, and the mechanization is going to clear cut it. And
Right.
so, and the bambuses don't like that. The big bamboos hate it.
Yeah, the
And
clumping bamboo it's no good. Yeah.
no, they don't, it really, really sets them back. So the interesting question on all of that, and the fact that like they were doing this like in the 1960s is like so crazy. The interesting question on all of that is like how, like which ones do, because there's 1,700 different bamboos. So which ones can you cut back and have them keep coming? Now it would make sense that the most aggressive runners, like a Pseudosausa japonica, would respond well to that, right? Because in applications, that's like in the forage application, that's going to be important to do that. As far as like how that translates to a tropical, the closest one I could say to that would be like a fern leaf, like a multiplex. So a bambusa multiplex fern leaf would be a small, calm one. But even that doesn't like to be cut down and then come back. It just doesn't, it takes a while.
Right. Yeah. The renewability of bamboo is that we always talk about, really is dependent on the selective harvesting, selecting out the mature culms and the most, the biggest ones. And that works great until you try to do it at scale, and you have a whole lot of people out there hand harvesting and trying to identify the most mature culms. And so, yeah, now people want to do bamboo for pulp, for paper, for fabric, for, any kind of pulp application. And when you're pulping, the idea is you can clear cut, which is a lot easier, but yeah, like you said, it doesn't respond well to that. You lose that regenerative property a little bit when you start clear cutting it every 2 or 3 years or something, which is what people are talking about doing. So yeah, it's an interesting point. So you do a lot of tea, is what I understand. You're like the specialist in bamboo leaf tea. Yeah, there it is. Nice. And there's a lot of talk about bamboo tea lately. Super high in silica, super good for the connective tissue in the hair and the skin, for arthritis. It's said to be super beneficial. So, and there's a lot of people who want to get into bamboo leaf tea, who've heard something about it and don't know which species is the best, and don't know like some of the more specific ways to prepare it. What can you recommend as far as that goes?
Yeah. So I love this because I think it's such, sometimes there's a lot of people who really have misunderstanding about bamboos. And so what I feel like my ultimate job is, and I like to joke, but it's really not a joke, is like, I work for them. Like bamboo collects people, right? And we all get because you meet people who are into bamboo and they're like, I don't know what it is. I just really like bamboo. And it's like that, like that's exactly what happens. Like, I don't know what it is. They're collecting all of us. But the other thing that I love about bamboo is like, it's not wheat, it's not rice, it's not, like it's a whole different grass. And what it really likes is when it collects people and then they work together. It doesn't like when somebody just goes rogue and does their own thing and thinks they're going to make like $1 million. Like it wants everybody to work together. It's like this.
It's
And
the
it,
bamboo
oh,
consciousness. I was just talking about this earlier with a friend of mine about how bamboo all flowers. Certain bamboos all flower at the same time, even if they're in different parts of the world, even if they're not cloned from the same plant. But somehow there's this consciousness between the bamboo. I know it sounds kind of woo-woo, but yeah, it's we couldn't come up with a better explanation. So what you're saying fits perfectly with that.
I've experienced for so many times where bamboo sets a hard no on things and it just is like, I'm not doing it. And it seemed to make a whole lot of sense until you did it. And then it's like a hard no. So bringing it back to tea, what I like is to share the tea with other people because I think that's the way bamboo likes to play. So that's what I like to do. So yeah, you can, the basics are you can make tea from any of the bamboos. Any of the bamboos can be used. And, so much of bamboo and the history of bamboo is based on what bamboos you have access to.
Mhm.
And I think that's really, really fascinating because it's like, it makes it a very, what I call like a social equalizing plant, right?
Mhm.
It's all about like, what do you have available? Use what you have, use what's in your area. You don't have to buy something and ship it all the way from the Himalayas in order to have like the best bamboo because you
Right.
can use them, right? There are some nuances between them, but basically all bamboos have silica, all bamboos have minerals. And yes, some have more than others, but like for instance, when it comes to silica, there's such high amounts in it that really like lower amounts and higher amounts, it doesn't matter because it's a water soluble element. And so you only can use so much anyway. The
Okay.
rest of it out. So like, okay, the bamboo, some people are like, well, which one has the highest amount of silica? It really doesn't matter because there's so much silica in all of them.
Body can't
Just
absorb it anyway at that rate.
use any of them. So my biggest proponent is to people is to the individual, like go out and use a bamboo. And if you don't have bamboo, walk down the street because like, I mean, bamboo is like, this is the one thing about bamboo is bamboos. I've been training myself, not bamboo, but bamboos, because we have to remember most people think like there's only one bamboo. There's like,
The
I
bamboo
mean,
species.
we're upwards of 1700 at this point, growing on almost everywhere in the world, right?
Mhm.
So go to Australia, Southeast Asia, Asia, Europe, United States, all over. I mean, we can grow them up into here in the United States, we can grow them up into -20. Those Himalayan bamboos will grow at -20. So bamboos are everywhere and you can use any of them. The second thing is they all taste different, all of them, which is fascinating, right? So you've got, if you go by color and taste, you've got like light yellow, sweet. In that category, you would put like Old Hamai is a light yellow sweet, as well as Pseudosauce japonica, which is used during the Japanese tea ceremonies in New Year's, right? So those two would be a light yellow sweet. In the middle, I would have something like Sea Breeze, Graceful. Those are bambusas. Philistachys would go in there. Philistachys has a little bit of a nutty flavor, like Aurea, something like that. And then on the darker side, I also really like Asper. Asper is a really great tea. I've made tea from about 100 different varieties at this point. Anything from Guadua to Moso to, I really like Moso. I like Guadua too. I really like Asper and Sea Breeze. And then all the way up to Ventricosa and Fernleaf, which are like, that's a multiplexes. And And those have like almost a dark brown color to the tea, which is really
Okay.
interesting. So the Philostakis I haven't played with so much because I don't have as much access to them, but I've made some. And then the time of year also makes a difference. So like in the summertime here, when we're in our rainy season, the flavor and everything changes. It kind of gets blown out because it's so wet. So I prefer to harvest in the dry season.
Okay.
Or I'll go to a different species. So you can do like a stronger flavor in the wet season, and that
Right.
gives kind of a lighter flavor,
Mhm.
right? Do a lighter flavor, like if I'm doing an Old Hamley Astruta Sausage Japonica, one of those lighter flavored ones, I'll probably only do that in the dry season because like in the wet season, you won't taste anything.
Okay. So
So
it's more intense in the dry season.
yeah, because the water content goes way
Yeah.
down. So, and then I've also done like where you pick out all the new leaves, the little curled up new leaves, and you pick them all up.
Okay.
That's a whole different flavor. Like
The
you
labor
can
of
do
love.
it. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Um, so the sky's the limit on like playing with it. And then some people aren't into tea, but you can still use the leaves to say like use them like you would like a bay leaf or an herb and put
Mhm.
some in like your rice or in your stews, and you're not going to eat them, but you're
Mhm.
just going to cook them, and then you're cooking the minerals out. So that way you're just remineralizing, and that's what bamboos do is they remineralize you through your food, through drink. They remineralize animals and they remineralize soils. So they remineralize the other plants around them. And to me, it's like, this is 2023. I get a lot of pushback from people who are pro native, and I'm very pro natives. And this is my answer to that is that I think when we're talking about natives, what we need to talk about is what we really mean is diversity of plants and diversity of animals. And so how can we use these plants to further the diversity of plants that are struggling? And that's what I like to look at bamboos, because plants in general work on somewhat, I mean, there is competition and that is true, but they also work on somewhat of a welfare system. And we know this about them, that they're sharing minerals, they're sharing resources, they're sharing all the stuff under the soil through the mycelium and the fungal networks and the bacteria. And we also know that plants that are very good at transpiration and very good at like taking sunlight and air and making sugar and creating all these things that they trade with the bacteria and the funguses, that they are asked to actually give back more to their community. So if they're better at creating these sugars and getting these minerals, they're asked to give back to the other plants in the system. And that's exactly what bamboo is. Bamboos are community builders because they are very good at creating these sugars, and they partner with huge amounts of bacteria and funguses,
Mhm.
which make them very important to the ecosystem. And even if they're not non-native, my feeling is that we can use them to help the other plants that might be struggling due to like the change in climate, or it's just a matter of fact, no matter what you think about climate, that we are having more severe stuff. It's more dry, it's more wet. If you work outside and work as a farmer at all,
Mhm.
you can see that this is changing. And so to be able to use these plants to help the other plants so that we can still increase our keep the diversity that we have, is the way I like to look at it.
Nice, nice. The bamboo welfare system. I like your analogy there.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Um, yeah, there's a lot of interesting stuff you said right there. I'm trying to think where to go with that. Um, um, Going back to the tea, I was going to ask about hot tea versus cold tea. Like, do you steep it, or does it depend on the time of year? Or what's your take on that?
Yeah, so that's a really good point. So there's usually with leaves, people are used to like a mint leaf, for instance. you don't want to go very hot because
Right.
you're going to lose all the magic that mint is. If you make that thing at boiling, it's like that. But what's really interesting about bamboos is bamboos are like rooibos tea is the only other one that's close to it. You can actually put that tea, and they do in Japan, through an espresso machine. And because it needs the heat. So actually treating the bamboo leaves like you would roots, barks, mushrooms, where they really need to be heated, is the best way. So like steeping them for a long period of time. I like to use a crock pot. I like to like bring them to a, so it's more of like a decoction was what it's called, where it really needs that heat. My favorite form of extract of bamboo is hydrosols, and that is the machine. So that's a distillation machine. And that hydrosol is basically like a floral water, is what, like a rose water. People are familiar with that. Is basically where it's the entire plant in a liquid form. And most people are familiar with essential oils. So when you distill a plant, you get a little bit of essential oil, and then you get a lot of this like water, is what it's called. If you keep them all in one, you've basically got almost all of the fat and water soluble elements of a plant in a liquid form, which is just, to me, like absolute magic at that point, because now you've got something. If it's a plant that you can ingest it. If it's a plant, otherwise you can wear it, you can put it on your hair, you can do all sorts of things. So with bamboos, hydrosols are really good for your skin, because you're literally getting like liquid silica into your skin, liquid minerals onto your hair. You can ingest it, you can use it in all sorts of ways, and it's just absolutely magical stuff. So that's one of my favorite ways to extract bamboos and really get all of the benefits.
Bamboo essence.
Bamboo essence, yeah, liquid bamboo. And that teas too. I love teas, but teas, remember when you're doing teas, is you're mostly going for like the water soluble elements. And a lot of minerals are water soluble, so that helps. But how you extract a plant is basically what you get from it. So with the teas, you're definitely getting a lot of what bamboos are known for, which is the silica. And silica we talked about a little bit. Silica is like one of these magic minerals that has gotten a lot of attention lately, because it makes your hair grow. It's like builds collagen. It's one of those minerals that you need for a lot of different components in your body. So it builds bone, right? With calcium and magnesium. And there's also magnesium in bamboo. There's manganese, there's zinc, there's copper, which is a mineral that people don't talk a lot about, but it's becoming very popular to talk about. So there's copper, there's iron, there's potassium, there's all these things. So using bamboos in all those different ways, whether you're remineralizing yourself directly or using bamboos as a chop and drop, or to chip them and put them back into your garden, into your soil, things like that. I mean, the whole concept of like, once you get into that, is like, well, we could use bamboos just to grow, like what you're doing with biochar, or you could just grow them and chip them down and put them back into the soil. And maybe that's their highest use. Like there's so many uses for bamboos that to hate on even the runners, to me, is like, we're just not, that's just short-sighted to look at that way. Like there's so many things you could do with that material. And like, I can go out and plant all day long and I'm not keeping up with one bulldozer. Right. So like utilizing these plants for what they're good for seems to me like a better idea of how we can do this.
Well said. Well said. How many kinds of bamboo do you have on your place, your farm?
I think I'm around 70.
Nice. And
Like
you're close to Orlando, right?
Yeah.
And that's
So
northern Florida.
Central Florida.
Central.
So we get cold and we get hot and we get rainy and we get dry. So the ones that do the best here are bambusas. Those are the ones that kind of can bridge over. And bamboos for us in the United States cannot go all the way up. Some of them can go all the way up to South Carolina, which is can get pretty cold, North Carolina, things like that. So we can do these clumping bamboos. And clumping bamboos are easy to manage, right? It's, you know, you put a barrier, you don't have to do any of these things. So putting that on homesteads and getting people, you know, I really look at, like, I really try and use the language around bamboos as like, these are working plants. Like, you have a working dog, you have a working plant. Like, you have to put these things to work. That's what they want to do. They want to work for you, right? So you need to give them a job. They sit there and look pretty, and they will, but they really need a job, right? So they need to be used, and you can use them for, you know, I use them a lot in windbreaks for food forests. That's really popular in the United States right now. You know, we have like first world issues here, right, as to how we're using them. So events, experiences, windbreaks for food forests, forage for animals, things like that make a lot of privacy. I like to use them a lot along roads. I do a lot of highway protection, you know,
Totally.
so people have roads that are expanding, and you can put bamboos up, and they're taking out, you know, this is protecting you from toxins from vehicles. It's protecting from it, noise, it provides habitat, it's cleaning the air, it's doing, and it's keeping cars from ending up in your house at 2 a.m. on Saturday, you know. Like, and that's a thing. That is a
The bamboo
thing.
barrier. Yeah, no,
Bamboo
I think that's one of the best places to plant bamboo along the highway for all those reasons. Clean the air, block the sound,
I
block the
I mean,
smog. Yeah.
here in Central Florida, we have so many apartment buildings going up, and they are putting them lining the highway. And we
Wow.
already have so much information about how your proximity to a major roadway, especially a highway, increases the amount of asthma in kids, like,
Right.
exponentially. And it's like,
Yeah.
and then they put these poor oak trees in there, like, that are suffering because
Mhm.
they don't do well with that. And, you know, it's like, I'm good with planting a mixture is what I usually want, is like, I want to see a blend of things. Let's diversify it. Let's not just do all one thing, and let's put bamboos in there so that they can help protect the other plants and let them grow. Let's put trees and bamboos.
Put them to work.
Hitting a bamboo with a car is a lot better than hitting a tree.
It's got a little bit of give. It still slows you down, but
More like a
uh,
soft pillow. Right. Exactly.
that is a great selling point for bamboo that I hadn't really thought of before. Definitely enjoy your perspective on bamboo and its many uses. I'm just picturing you out there in your bamboo garden cracking the whip. Get back to work. Get back to work. But seriously,
We all have to, you know what? This is what I tell them. We all have to pay the rent. I mean, I'm working, okay, right? They better work too. Like, they got to pay the rent. I got to pay the rent. We all got to pay the rent.
there's
So
no free lunch. Yeah.
no free lunch. Exactly.
Oh
Exactly.
man.
I had a conversation with Mark Peters last year that was just amazing. I mean, he just pours out like information, like, unbelievable, right? And he was telling me, I mean, a couple of things stood out in the conversation. One was like the bamboos that they're using to basically halt the progression of the desert. You know, these native bamboos that they're using. I think Blumiana is one of them, and
Okay.
then or what else, but these are like literally drought tolerant bamboos that they're using to stop the progression of the desert.
In Africa, along the Sahel region. Yeah.
Yep. Yep. And I mean, that to me is like unbelievable, fascinating. And the
Mhm.
other story he told me that I loved was they had, I think it was about 4 years ago in his region, they had a really bad volcano eruption. A lot of people died. And this guy came to him afterwards and he said, I just have to tell you my story. He said, in my area of my village, we had bamboo planted, but he said it was further up the hill from me. And he said, we didn't know the volcano was going to erupt, but we heard the bamboo explode because before the lava and everything comes down, it's like this hot gas comes down, and it
Right.
doesn't affect the trees, but the bamboos, because they're that, that cylinder, that sealed cylinder,
Your bubbles
it,
went
it, yeah, it was like, but these are big bamboos, right? So it
loud,
was
yeah.
like, boom. And he said, as soon as they heard that, they just grabbed his whole village, they grabbed everything and ran, and they survived. And other people who were, basically in this a different proximity, but a same sort of situation, who didn't have bamboos, they didn't survive. And he's like, bamboo literally saved my life. It was like, wow, that's intense. That's an interesting
That's
perspective.
crazy.
Yeah. And then he showed
Volcano
pictures.
warning system.
Yeah, the lava came down and covered over these huge clumps of bamboo, like picture like some big dendrocalamus, like an
Right.
asper, big, right? The lava came down and just pushed them over, right? The first plant growing back up through the lava, bamboo.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Indestructible.
Yeah. So, I mean,
Wow.
that's kind of what we need, right? Like those can be utilized.
Yeah.
How can we use them to the best of our ability? I mean, we're not operating Zoom on Apple IIe's, right? Like, like let's use what we have to help the other plants and to help the diversity and to help the animals and to help create, using the land that we have left in the best possible way, and using the plants that want to help instead of stopping them from helping. Let's let them help.
For sure. Got a few more minutes here. I just wanted to ask you what you think about all these ideas about farming bamboo in the US. I just got back from the European Bamboo Expo in Germany
Yeah.
a few weeks ago. Super fun time. But there's a lot of the expo was about promoting bamboo in Europe, farming bamboo in Europe for Europe, which is pretty good idea. But there was some skepticism about it at the same time, whether it makes sense to farm a tropical, something like bamboo in Europe when it grows so well in other places like Africa or Latin America. And I think it's a similar debate going on in the US, where people want to have, domestic bamboo supply. But it would be a lot cheaper probably to just get bamboo imported from Mexico, or, not that far away, getting it from Guatemala or Colombia or something. And then there's been a lot of efforts to farm bamboo in Florida, some more successful than others, and then throughout the Southeast as well. Do you have any thoughts on that? I don't know. And we're back.
Sorry. Okay. Yes, I do. Europe and the US have similar, I would say the US might have just a little bit slightly better advantage because we have so much room. Because Europe, there's just no room, to grow bamboos, and to grow bamboos, they need a lot of room. And there's a lot happening in Florida, a lot of talk. Where it's going to go is unknown, right? So, and I love it. I think it's great. And I hope that it does work out. There's a lot of hurdles when it comes to bamboos. There's also a lot of interest, right? There's a lot of things that bamboos could be good for. I think the keys to all of that, in my opinion, is to think about bamboos as to their highest value. So to me, in the US, when we talk about farming bamboos, like using them for things where you can make engineered materials that are more high end. So making materials and making things from bamboos that make sense to make them here. And what I mean by that is, like, for instance, with the teas, it makes sense to make the teas where you are, because tea and medicinal products are better when they're not shipped all over the world.
Mhm.
When you're from your own farm, from your own home, from the people down the street, or getting them locally, that's a much better scenario than shipping them all the way from India, right? So the second thing would be utilizing them for like these engineered materials, which are all coming. You know, us making paper pulp, I'm not sure that we're going to be able to do that. We have to have thousands and thousands and thousands of acres in order to do something like that, unless you can make a smaller paper mill and make it more specialized. But I think the idea around specialized materials that are higher value so that we can use our more expensive labor market would make sense. Otherwise, Colombia is not that far.
Right.
You know, people like Stefan Schroeder, who's already doing a ton of stuff, right, in Colombia and doing it well. So so making those high-end products and utilizing bamboos for the best of their ability is what I see. And we're talking about shoots and things like that. And when I think about shoots, I think, well, okay, raw material versus making something specialized and making value added is where I look at it. So like selling poles, selling shoots, things like that is going to be really tough. And I think just going with higher value is where it's going to have to be, because there's a lot of training that has to go into the labor market.
Yeah, I know a lot of the US farmers, they're just selling bamboo shoots. That's their main market. But yeah, the value addition is essential. But there's so many things you could do, you know, pickling them and fermenting them and making bamboo shoot kimchi and on and
Yeah.
on. But
My
yeah,
friend from Australia with Big Heart Bamboo, she does amazing stuff with bamboo. She's my bamboo sister. So she does absolutely amazing stuff. She makes chutneys and all sorts of things with bamboo. She's second. And so I just love her dearly. So if anybody's interested in seeing kind of the things that you can do, and then there's also a really good book that Nirmala wrote on bamboo shoots that has a lot of information. She's out of India. She's done a ton of work on studying different bamboos and uses in medicinal and food. So she's a really good resource, and you can buy that book on Amazon.
Nice. All right, I'll put some links down below for the for your tea, as well as what's the lady in Australia? Big Bamboo?
Big Heart Bamboo,
Big Heart
Becky.
Bamboo, right. Yeah, I see her stuff. Yeah, it looks amazing. The bamboo chutney.
Daughter and Dunford Dart started the bamboo industry basically in Australia, and his daughter does like medicinal and food and things like that. Super creative, amazing woman.
Nice. Yeah, I met some other Australians in Germany a couple of weeks ago. House of Bamboo. They do some amazing furniture and building material with bamboo. And they've been doing that for like 30 years, I think. Or maybe more like 40 or 50 years. I think it was more like 50 years actually. But
wow.
Lots of cool bamboo stuff going on in Australia. I'll have to get them on one of these episodes in the future for sure.
Yeah. Good building.
It's been amazing. I don't know if you have anything else you want to add. That's been a fabulous conversation. Really enjoyed talking with you.
Yeah.
I'll put some links down below, like I said, for those other guys and for your tea. And keep up the great work and make sure your bamboo keeps up its great work as well. No slackers in the bamboo field.
No slacking. I just love what you're doing, Fred. Thank you so much for putting all this information out, because it's so important for people to be able to go online. And I gotta say, like, most plant people, like, we're kind of not like super out there talking about things as much as I am. Plant and animal people, we tend to be a little bit of loners, do our own thing. stuff. So we need you, right? We need you out there talking about what's happening. So thank you so much for doing this.
Nice. It's a pleasure. All right. Thank you, Shanti.
All right.
We'll talk again soon.
You absolutely sounds good.